you guys all enjoy.
Don't usually hold back when it comes to talking about my job, which was working security at the sub-level of a local hospital. You'd be surprised to know how common breaks-in were at that place, which usually end up with a couple of junkies trying to get high on some of the weird chemicals that were being kept in the lab.
It started out as a regular graveyard shift at work, but I will lead it with a curious backstory regarding the door that led to the morgue. In order to keep the place more sanitized, they had recently installed sliding doors, which would automatically open if someone passed in front of them, thus removing the need to touch any handles or doorknobs, and prevent anyone from leaving the doors open by accident. Hygiene played a major role at the morgue, and it had been on the agenda for the past few months. There wasn't anything really unique about the sliding doors, except for the fact that they would sometimes open and close by themselves. It didn't seem like such a big deal since this could have been caused by something small, such as moth flying in front of the sensor. Until one night I realized that it would have always happened at the same time. Every night at exactly 3 a.m., the door would open for a few seconds and then close. I was convinced that the doors had been programmed with some kind of time-based trigger, but when I contacted the company that installed the doors, they told me that it wasn't possible, since the doors were designed only to open when the sensors were triggered or forced open manually. So it continued without any explanations for a long time after that. Usually there would be at least 2 guards on duty, but that night I ended up working the graveyard shift by myself because the other security guard suddenly became ill, and there wasn't enough time to find a tent.
Just to be clear, I had been working as a security guard for a long time, so I was no stranger to danger and wasn't worried about working alone at night. Besides, the words were pretty straightforward. All I had to do is make sure all the doors were locked and secured and keep a close eye on monitor. There were only 2 cameras, one overlooking the control room and another one at the other end of the corridor, overlooking the entrance to the morgue. As the clock approached 3 a.m., I did what all the guards on duty would do: sit back and enjoy the show.
Although the novelty of seeing this phenomenon had long worn off, it was still something that I would anticipate and would often give me the chills, seeing how it was the entrance to the morgue and that you could sense a sudden rush of cold air every time the door would open, even from the other end of the corridor. I watched patiently as the door opened, followed by a howling rush of cold air that could be heard from under the door. It was when I glanced away from the door and looked to the monitors that I noticed something strange. The doors remained opened. At first, I thought it might be a glitch with the monitor, and I was simply looking at a frozen frame. But then I saw the light flickers. I waited for a few minutes, but it soon became clear that I would have to head on down to the corridor, since it was strictly prohibited for the doors to the morgue to remain opened. As I stepped out into the corridor, I acknowledged a significant drop in temperature, which I knew was going to get considerably worse as I approached the morgue. I gradually made my way down to the corridor and turned the corner that ultimately led me to the sliding doors. I had hopes that the doors might have closed by the time I got there. But just as I expected, the door was in fact still open and the cameras was functioning normally. I tried waving my hands in front of the sensors, but to no avail. The doors would not budge. I was thinking my next option, which was to test the sensors from the other side, requiring me to enter the morgue. But I decided to take a look around first to see if I could observe anything out of the ordinary. Only when I turned my back to observe the corridor did the door finally close, which was quickly accompanied by a cold chill in the air. I could feel an overwhelming sense of someone standing right behind me. As the hair on the back of my neck began to spike, but it turns out to be more the same eerie silence as before. Since the doors already closed without having to actually enter the morgue, I considered myself fortunate and hurried back to the control room to make sure nothing else was out of piece. I closed the door and locked it from the inside. For a moment I was expecting it to be business as usual as I sat back down in front of the monitors. But after taking a quick sip of my coffee, I realized the coffee was stone cold. Not just lukewarm as you expect, but genuinely chilled. I hadn't been away from the desk for that long, so it doesn't make any sense. But then I remembered that I had felt the same chill before, at the other end of the corridor. Out of the curiosity, I decided to rewind the security footage back to when I approached the doors to see if I could spot anything out of the ordinary, which is when I witnessed something that I simply couldn't explain. There was a girl standing in front of the doors right behind me. I couldn't really make out of the face due to her long black hair that was a stark contrast to the white gown she was wearing. She just stood there and staring right at me, and then walked away. To this day, I can't explain it because I had just been there and hadn't seen anyone. It was when I checked the other camera overlooking the entrance to the control room. And
when the lights came back on, it was as if nothing happened. The door to the control room was open despite being locked from the inside just moments before. Due to the mysterious power surge, most of the data on the drive had been completely corrupted, but some of the security footage did survive, and I have been holding on to it ever since. I guess now would be the time to ask yourself, do you believe in ghosts?